All right, guys, it is the Tuesday after free agency essentially kind of started the legal tampering period, and I am going to go over and give my own personal grades. I am just here at NFL.com, essentially 25, the free agency tracker info for all 32 teams. This is going to be kind of blind. I did look it over before bed last night, but I'm just gonna go over and I'm gonna give my first impression grades on this, including any contract extensions. Because as we can see, obviously Josh Allen, the Bills are up here, and then Greg Rousseau are also in there. If they did any extensions, I am going to weigh in on that as well. But without further ado, I'm gonna try to do the speed edition, and I'm just gonna recite the grade and maybe not put too much thought into it. So starting off the Bills and Josh Allen, a new 6-year deal with 30 million with 250 million guaranteed. I believe that does put him up 55 million a year or something like that. It makes sense. I think the Bills got somewhat of a bargain. I think Allen loves it there, and I think last year he proved in this system that he is, that elite top 5 talent, maybe even top 3, to be honest with you, in the league. Probably top 3. Josh Palmer, 3-year, 36 million contract with 18 million guaranteed. I think this is a good signing. I don't think Josh Palmer is like an exceptional standout, but I think this is good in the sense that they just paid Shakir on this team, obviously, right here. And it was a good amount of money for him, for a young player like him who still could play a bit better. So I'm going to give, I guess I didn't really grade Josh Allen's deal. I'm giving this an A plus, and A plus will be the highest grade I give. Josh Palmer, I'm going to give this a B plus, just because I think they could have went after someone else. Khalil Shakir, I am also going to give this, I'm going to give it an A minus. He's obviously a pivotal part. It keeps growing season after season, but we'll see if that continues, with the potential, upside he still has and can give. Edge, Michael Hoyt, 3-year contract worth up to 24 million. Obviously, with the release of Von Miller, and then it's like Michael Hoyt, and then it's like you also have Greg Rousseau for 4-year, 80 million extension, who keeps getting better and was raw coming into the league. I think this is a good signing for a player that, you wanted to lock up and could have cost more. I'm going to give this Michael Hoyt one just because I don't know too much about it. I think that 3 years, 24 million. I think that that's for a guy that I don't really know too much about. I am going to give this one a B grade. Rousseau, I'm going to give this an A as well. I think that Rousseau at times does disappear, but I think that overall he is an above average impact player that can continue to get better and still at a prime age. Terrell Bernard, linebacker, 4-year worth up to 50 million. It's like 12.5 million a year. I'm going to say this was kind of an overpay. I feel like I'm going to give it a C plus because I do think that they need help on the Bills and that sort of thing in the linebacker room. And then Reed Ferguson resigned to a 4-year contract. I'm assuming that with, the lawn snapper and the kicker and the punter, and Tyler Bass, being good in the postseason, I'd say this is a good signing. They have really good consistency there, at least in the postseason. Bass in the regular season, kind of weird. Now for Miami, they signed Zach Wilson. This kind of shocks me. I thought there would be some team potentially that would bring him in for a QB competition, a former number 2 overall pick. I think this is solid, though. And I think that maybe Wilson, depending on Tua, obviously, in his, consistent injury history, Zach Wilson could maybe learn the system and be a good backup. But time will tell. Mike McDaniels work his magic on Wilson. They could maybe even turn this into a future draft pick, potentially, even though it's only a 1-year deal. I think that they could, try him out. And if he works, sign him to like a 2-year deal and maybe get draft capital in the future, depending, because there's not a lot of QBs in the draft this year, and a lot of them might not pan out too. Offensive line, Larry Borom signing a deal. We don't have the details. I think this is good. I think the problem with the Dolphins offense is their O-line quite a bit. A guard, James Daniels, 3-year, $24 million deal, not too expensive. I think that this is good too. I don't know who James Daniel is. I'm just going to give this a B. That's probably what I'm going to keep to. If it's a position of need and I don't know the player, I'm probably going to stick to B grade. Cornerback, Fiatu Melifonwu, do a 1-year, $4 million deal. I think this is a bargain for the guy like this. While he might not, you kind of know what you're getting with him. I think it's a bargain, and I think that's what Miami needed. I will give this a B+. Moving to New England, Joshua Dobbs, 2-year, $8 million. I think it's good. I think that, with Jacoby Brissett leaving, you need a reliable veteran backup for Drake May, and I think this is a good deal for a veteran quarterback. That maybe is a little bit worse than Brissett, to be honest with you, but, good signing, good backup for a guy who a couple of years ago was looking, pretty darn good. So I'm going to give this a B+. Mac Hollins, they're really trying to get some competition in there. I think Mac Hollins did well with Josh Allen. I think he can do good with Drake May as well. A 2-year, $8.4 million deal as a max. I think this is a great bargain price. I'm going to give this will be my second A+. We saw how Mac Hollins was able to develop with Josh Allen and create that chemistry. I think he could do the same with Drake May. Austin Hooper re-signing to a $5 million deal. I think this is fine. A tall, big-bodied security blanket type player, obviously behind Hunter Henry, but a good tight end, a good veteran tight end with experience. I'm going to give this a B, just because I think that they could have, looked to the draft as well. Morgan Moses, I think this is great. 3-year, $24 million deal. He is older, but he hasn't missed a ton of time, and I definitely think he brings a veteran presence into that line room. And I think that this, for a tackle, $24 million, I think that this is a good deal. I'm going to give this an A-, just because the age is a little bit of a concern. And will he play those 3 years? Edge, Harold Landry, I think this is huge. And a 3-year, $43.5 million deal, I think this is a good value for Harold Landry. I think that, this is a guy who was projected to have a lot of upside and be better than what he is. But it's definitely a spot of need for the Patriots. After trading Judon, they need pass rushers, which I'm sure, they address this here. I'm sure they'll still draft one. So looking at Harold Landry, I'm going to give this an A-, just because I don't think, I think, you could have obviously went to some other, pass rushers potentially, or traded for one. Defensive line, Milton Williams, this was obviously huge. The former Eagle agreed to a 4-year, $104 million deal. With $51 million fully guaranteed at signing, including a $24 million signing bonus. So it's like, it seems to me like with a $24 million signing bonus and, fully guaranteed, it's a good amount of money, but it's like in years down the line, it sounds like it's going to be very cheap, potentially, where it's like, if he doesn't work out, or if he only did well because of that Studley Eagles D-line, then, maybe they move on or something like that. But I think that Milton Williams will be a nice addition to this team. And I'm going to give this an A for getting one of the marquee free agents. Chris Tonga, don't really know about him. D-line, I think that, I'm going to give this a B-. Linebacker Robert Spillane, a free agent deal, don't know much about it. I'm going to give this a B. The Carlton Davis at $20 million a year was kind of like, the player I don't mind. I think Carlton Davis is scrappy, but he gets exposed at times, and then he's also somewhat injured, are the two knocks I have for this. And I'm actually going to give this might be unpopular, but I'm going to give this I'm going to give it a C+, actually, because I think that Carlton Davis is good, but this is so much money, for a guy that wasn't, he was obviously hurt at the end of the year last year, for the Lions. I mean, who wasn't hurt on their team, but it's like, he's always had durability issues. I like the player, but not how much he got paid. And it's like, I think he only got this because of how much money the New England have, of like $129 million are going into free agency. Now, the New York Jets signed Fields. I wonder if he's the bona fide starter. I mean, clearly he is right now, but what if they want to draft a QB as well? Or is it a 2-year because they're like, oh, if we suck real bad, we might just go after Archie Manning, like everyone is saying with these teams that could potentially suck this year. I think the money's fine, $30 million guaranteed. In 2025 is $5 million base salary, type of thing. So it's like, it doesn't seem like they would cut him after the first year. You'd obviously 2 years isn't a long commitment anyways, but I'm going to give this grade a B+, actually, because I think Fields has just gotten a lot of undue criticism, and it reminds me of like Lamar Jackson. This guy just needs a chance to actually play on a team, that maybe has an offensive coordinator. I don't know what Aaron Glenn, I guess, is doing in that department, but I think Fields has gotten a lot of undue criticism when it's like he's been on these teams that are defensive minded, and then I don't know, the whole thing with Russell Wilson was kind of stupid to me. Why did they play Russ? It was short-lived, his kind of lucky streak, which he's had the last few years for Russell Wilson, and it's like, they could have played Fields. They honestly, I feel like they should have re-signed Fields, but whatever. I'm giving this a B+. Linebacker Jamien Sherwood, 3-year, $45 million deal. I like Sherwood. I think a little expensive, to be honest, in what they're paying him for a linebacker. I'm going to give this, it'll be my second C+ because of how expensive it was. Cornerback Brandon Stevens, a 3-year, $36 million contract. So I think Brandon Stevens is fine. I think that they really did this because of the departure of DJ Reed. And then safety Andre Cisco, obviously a former Jaguar, a 1-year deal worth up to $10 million. I think Cisco could thrive in this system. The Aaron Glenn defense, obviously the safeties back in Detroit did very, very well and were speedsters. I think Cisco was in a bad system, but, did his best. And the Jaguars, I mean, you can't really tell a player's talent when their scheme is cheeks or whatever else. But Andre Cisco, I think, still a good amount of upside and very young. I'm going to give this a B+. Moving on to the AFC North, Baltimore Ravens, their only signing is re-signing Ronnie Stanley, who was a pending free agent. I think this is fine. $20 million a year or whatever it is. I'm going to give this a B+, because he's on the field, he's been a good stalwart for that line. And he was fully healthy all of last year. Now looking at the Bengals, Samaje Perine interesting. I think they get him because they see like how valuable he was out of the passing game as a security blanket outlet. I'm actually going to give this an A. 3.8 million for this guy who's a very intelligent player and can do a lot of good things. You know, for a team that he's not going to be your workhorse back, but he can be your third down and, you know, excel in that. T. Higgins, I'm going to say for this, I'm just going to say that it's a B just because it's a franchise tag. And it's like no player really wants to, you know, do this. But I mean, I would rate it lower if it was more money, but I think that this is more than reasonable for Higgins, 26.2 million. Mike Gesicki coming back. He was listed as my top tight end for free agency. Obviously, you know, 3-year deal worth 25.5 million with 12 million in year one. I think this is kind of insane. I feel like Gesicki, obviously tight ends don't ever get a ton of money despite being very impactful and, you know, most teams having a very good tight end that are playoff and Super Bowl contenders. So I think this is huge. You keep the amount of weapons for Burrow available, and I guess you keep him happy for the time being. And I'm going to give this an A. Tanner Hudson, a 1-year contract. It doesn't really do much for me. I'm going to give this a B. Cody Ford, re-signed to a 2-year contract. I think that Cody Ford is, you know, more of a power run type guy, and you know, you don't really have a power running game. A 2-year contract, it's kind of bizarre. I'm going to give this a C+, just because I know that they need a line. Edge, Joseph Asai, a 1-year deal worth up to $7 million. I think Joseph Asai, being a large edge and, you know, player, I do like him, but it's like limited production, and then $7 million. I don't see it. I'm going to give it a C. D-line, BJ Hill. I think BJ Hill, you know, $11 million a year. I think that's solid. I'm going to give that a A-. Just because you kind of know what you're getting with him, but he's good against the run, and he fills that role definitely above average. TJ Slaton, this I didn't get. The former Packer, obviously I know this player. Paying him, you know, $7.5 million, a little bit above $7.5 million a year. I'm glad my team did not re-sign him. I loved TJ when he made plays, but overall, you know, sometimes he just didn't really hold his ground for being a young and large player, you know, that you expect to kind of be stronger. Linebacker Oren Burks. I think Oren Burks, I believe that he was on Oren Burks. Now I'm going to check this. Yeah, he was on the Eagles. He did a lot of good things for the Eagles at the end of last year. Only $2.5 million. I think this is a good signing, a closet signing, you know, a hard hitter. You don't really want, and a good tackler. Oren Burks, you know, really lays the hammer when he tackles and is a physical player, you know, in the run game. So I'm going to give this a B+. Just because, you know, he's not going to be incredibly flashy, but he's going to bring a toughness to your defense, which I think the Cincinnati defense really needed last year. Line snapper Caladontis, a B. I don't pay attention to all the line snappers. Now the Browns going Kenny Pickett, so he's back within the division, and, you know, a 2025 5th round pick. I'll obviously see what that, you know, becomes or whatever. In exchange for QB Dorian Thompson Robinson, you wouldn't really. I want to say that a 5th round pick in this, it's kind of shocking in a sense. But, you know, I'm gonna say this with the Browns, you know, maybe you're not able to get a QB this year. You know, you try out Pickett, you see what is going on with him. You know, maybe he learned a little bit when he was on the Eagles. I have no idea. but it's like, I'm just going to give this a B. I think that it's a we'll see kind of thing. It's like, you can't really like knock. I honestly think the Steelers handled Pickett kind of ignorantly. I think they could have gotten from him what they got from Russell, and they wouldn't have had to have this whole debacle potentially. So it's like, who knows? We'll see. Myles Garrett signing an extension for a crazy amount of money. I'll just give this an A+. He's obviously one of the best still, and the team wants him to retire. A Brown is what I'm getting from this, and they were like, let's just give him the house, and let's not give a shit about our cap problem. So A+. The Steelers, tight end Donald Parham Jr. I'm going to give this actually a C-. I think Darnell Washington should get more snaps. Obviously, Freiermuth is a contributor on a lackluster offense, so I'm going to give this a C-. I don't really think they need a tight end like this and to go out and sign one. The DK Metcalf trade, I think that they got swindled on this. I think the amount of money that Metcalf wanted was higher than his talent and what has been shown as his talent. He never really took over a game last year. It was the JSN year for the Seahawks. I am going to give this a C-, which might be a little harsh, but DK, I'm glad my Packers weren't actually in on him, because he's a locker room cancer. You pair him with Pickens, it's like, who the hell knows? And obviously no other signings. It said that they were in talks with Rodgers. Didn't happen. Oh, goodness, I did not mean to. Defensive line, Malik Harrison, 2-year, $10 million deal. I'm going to give this a C+ for me, not really knowing who Malik Harrison is. But $5 million for a guy I don't know, someone who pays attention to the game, I'm like, what is going on? The Texans, Ogunbowale, re-signing on a 1-year, $2 million deal. I'll give it a B+ just for how cheap it is. Braxton Berrios, a 1-year, $2 million deal. Veteran wide receiver. I'll take it. They need wide receiver help, and I don't know if Berrios is that guy. Obviously, them trading for Christian Kirk, they clearly have enough weapons for Stroud, but they're trading away all their O-line. So Braxton Berrios, I'll give this a B+, mainly because it's so cheap. Christian Kirk, I am going to give this an A+. He hasn't been completely healthy all the time, but like for a 7th round pick, that is for next year. It's not even this year, you guys. So it's like, what the hell are the Jaguars doing? The Jaguars are just, I don't know. They are a poorly ran organization. Wide receiver, A+ for Christian Kirk. Might not be wasn't the best, wide receiver available essentially. But it's like, for this, you're essentially paying nothing. But then wide receiver Justin Watson, I believe this man was on the Chiefs, correct? Or maybe he was on the Chiefs. I do like this guy. He's taller. He is 28 years old. Kind of a good jump ball sort of dude, contested catch sort of guy. I like this. We don't know the money. I am actually going to say, though, that this is a B+ signing. Defensive line, Sheldon Rankins, 1-year deal with a max value of $7 million. I think this veteran, can add, to their line a little bit and veteran experience. The interior wasn't exactly weak. You obviously have 2 great edge players on the Texans, but I kind of assume that it's like, what their coach is doing, because the D-line for the Niners, DeMeco Ryans, the D-line for the Niners was good when he was on the team, and, the D-line continues to shine under DeMeco Ryans on the Texans. So B+ to this. Edge, Derek Barnett, this must just be kind of solidifying the backups. No problem with that. I will give I'll just pair these together. They're both B+. They're not paying a ton, but to have depth at pass rush is huge. Not that Danielle Hunter's never really had terrible injury issues, and Will Anderson obviously, has played, every game, I'm pretty sure. But then cornerback, kick returner Tremont Smith, a 2-year, $7 million deal. These guys on the Texans in the DB room are dogs, and they've proven to be dogs and a very like exceptional players in that defense. And it's not just because of the pass rush. They are scrappy and they play well. So I don't really know Tremont Smith, but I'm assuming he's a depth piece. Obviously, I'm going to give this a B plus. And then C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I think this is huge. They traded Kenyon Green with this. I am fine with this. I think Kenyon Green hasn't really lived up to the reputation. And it's like, but he does. I mean, I can understand why the Eagles traded for him because he is a big, beefy dude. And with Mekhi Becton departing, you get a cheap guy like Green. Obviously, we'll see this a little bit too in the Eagles, but I'm going to give the Eagles a B plus on this because he can fit their scheme. And then I'm going to give the Texans a C, A minus for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Not a C, you guys. C grade, an A minus because he's a good player and he will really solidify the top. Which I think the safeties on the Texans were like the only really like what I would say weak position on the defense. That just everything else a position of strength, honestly, on that defense. Moving on to the Colts, they signed Daniel Jones. I think this is good for them. I think Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson could have similar. They both have strong arms. While Daniel Jones obviously isn't as, fast or, as Richardson probably, he's a powerful runner and he can run, very streaky with speed. So and a lot of people hate on Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones, given the right system and given the proper time, because he was in the cursed land of New York for so long, I think he could do better because it's like, you don't have the respect of a guy like Saquon Barkley, who now is a Super Bowl champion and still lays credence to Daniel Jones. And it just seems to me like New York is just it's a shithole for QBs, and it's been proven year after year after year after year, even with Eli Manning, future Hall of Famer who obviously didn't go this year. It's like, here's my mini rant about New York, but they've always sucked with QBs. They've sucked with QBs. Even ones that turn out good, like Eli Manning, people are like, oh, he wasn't anything like crazy special. But it's like, I think that's, I just think that, Daniel Jones needs a realistic shot. And it's like, why are there so many suitors? Why is he still so talked about amongst teams? It's because teams know of the talent and that he's got a modern QB, archetype where he can run, he's got speed, he's got toughness, he's got a strong arm. I just think he needs the right system. And I mean, maybe it works in Indianapolis, who kind of proved that their organization is in limbo too from a management and coaching standpoint, but we'll see, So it's like, I'm going to give this a minus, and you can come after me if you want. Now, wide receiver Ashton Dulin, re-signing on a 2-year deal with $8.5 million. A backup piece to that team with Pittman and Pierce. But I'm gonna give that it's gonna be a B. And then they get Charvarius Ward. I'm kind of unhappy because I wanted my Packers to get him, but they needed DV help. So a 3-year deal worth up to $60 million with $35 million guaranteed. I think this was a good deal. I think it shows that Indianapolis isn't going to be like tied at the hip. Some of these cornerback deals that are going out here, they're like tied to the hip. And then it's kind of like if this player's hurt or they don't pan out, it's like they end up getting traded, especially like I think of JC Jackson, type of thing. Safety Cameron Bynum, 4 years, $60 million contract. I think this was an overpay. I don't mind Bynum, but It's just like, I don't know, looking at, Bynum from Minnesota, it's like he wasn't the guy. He wasn't the guy. Yeah, he's still pretty young, but it's like he wasn't the guy on Minnesota. It's like you still were thinking of Harrison Smith, being the guy or whatever else. And it's like, I don't know, for a guy that it's like, sure, he was kind of a tackling machine, the last 3 years for a safety, but it's like not much else. I mean, a decent amount of picks, but I think that they had to overpay just because of like the market and what teams had money or whatever else. But it's like, we'll see. I don't know. Paying a dude for being a glorified tackler and not the reason the Vikings defense was, good these last year they were good, the year before, iffy, and then the year, learning the Flores system, and then the year before that they sucked, but they were under a bad system. So it's like, we'll see. I'm going to give this a B. Because I saw this guy play twice a year, obviously, and it's like, how often was his name brought up for being just a crazy player? Like, hardly ever. I think there's a reason why the Vikings didn't keep him. Jacksonville Jaguars, Nick Mullins. He kind of, to me, screams like a dude that it's like, oh yeah, he can pass for a ton of yards when we're not a running team, obviously. Wide receiver Dyami Brown, 1-year deal. Nick Mullins, I'm going to give a C+, because it's not like he won't give you yards, but he does the turnovers with it. Dyami Brown, 1 year, $10 million. I don't know what they're doing. I'm going to say this is a C+. Hunter Long. Wait a minute. Oh, yes, Hunter Long. That's right, from the Rams. I don't know why I was thinking of another team. He wasn't bad. He wasn't good. A 2-year, $5 million deal with a -$6 million. I still don't understand why you got rid of Evan Ingram. He wasn't really a cap casualty, and it's like Tila and him seemed to have chemistry last year. But I'm gonna give this one a C, a B, a C+. Like, offensive tackle Robert Hainsey, 3-year, $21 million. I'm gonna give it actually a C. Patrick McCarry, the guard. We don't know any, agreed to a free agent deal. I don't know. We don't know anything about it. I'm gonna give this a C+ too. Just a guy that I'm like, I'm not huge on. Jordan Lewis, 3-year, $30 million. Seems like it's we'll wait and see. But they've had problems at DB for years for Jacksonville. So I'll give this a B just because it's a need. Safety Eric Murray, 3-year, $22.5 million. This is definitely affordable for a safety. Safety that it's like, I think a downgrade from Cisco, to be honest with you. Maybe not a huge downgrade, but obviously a need now. I'm going to give this a B-. Moving on to Tennessee, tackle Dan Moore, 4-year, $82 million. With $50 million guaranteed. They definitely need O-line help, and Dan Moore Jr., we'll see. I'm going to say this one's a B too. Sebastian Joseph Day, they 1-year deal worth up to $7.5 million. I think, good signing. I'm going to give this one a B+. Linebacker Cody Barton. Cody Barton, kind of just your average, run-of-the-mill middle like linebacker that it's like, does everything, at least an average level. I'm going to say that this is a B+. Line center Morgan Cox. I don't know. He's re-signed. I can't remember if the Jaguars had kicking problems last year, to be honest with you. They just were overall a bad team, obviously. And then the Broncos. Jarrett Stidham. I think he's a reliable backup. They've had him for years now. Good cheap deal to back up Bo Nix. and I'm going to give it a B+. Offensive tackle Matt Peart, 2 years, $7 million deal. Obviously, the O-line of the Broncos was actually pretty good last year. I think it's a good thing that they got him for so cheap. I'm going to give this an A-. Dre Greenlaw, I think this is a tremendous signing. It does seem like a move, for this defense that I think they had linebacker injury issues last year. And Greenlaw obviously has a little bit of injury history, but if he can kind of return up to form a little bit, he's obviously going to be a good addition. And 3 year, $35 million, that's a good deal. I'm going to give this one an A grade. And then another former 49er, Talanoa Hufanga, a 3 year deal worth up to $45 million. I think this was an overpay, and I'm not sure why. You get a lot of sacks. The safety position definitely wasn't that much of a factor last year. You let Justin Simmons walk, which proved that who cares? We get the most sacks in the league, which I don't think anyone saw coming. So I think this is an overpay. I'm gonna give it a C-. The Chiefs, Elijah Mitchell, free agent deal, running back. Obviously, they're losing Kareem Hunt, and then Samaje Perine, we talked earlier, are leaving. So it's you have Pacheco, who they've said they're not going to extend until they see him return to form. Elijah Mitchell's just kind of your gadget third down. I'm just going to say it's a B grade, for this team. Wide receiver Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, 1 year contract worth up to $11 million. Obviously, last year he didn't play. He had that injury, type of thing. I think that him and Mahomes did have chemistry, and I think that they just value the speed on this team with Worthy and Hollywood Brown, and hopefully this year they can put it up, because I think that this is a team that they're going to have a lot of young talent, and it's going to be kind of unprovens this year, besides the QB on the offensive side. And even their O-line is taking a hit with the trade of Tooney. But I'm going to give Marquise Brown, I'm going to give this a B+, because I do think that he is a player that can really, just create headaches for defenses. Offensive tackle Jalen Moore agreed to a 2 year, $30 million contract. I think it was a slight overpay. I still think that they do need O-line help on the Chiefs, but I'm going to give this a B-. And then guard Trey Smith, as we know, the second franchise tag player, $23.4 million. Definitely a bargain for this caliber of a guard, so it is the tag, but I do think that Trey Smith is going to try to re-sign there as a player who he was drafted there. He was a late pick. No one believed of him. And now he's one of the finest linemen, guards in the league, if not one of the best, so I'm going to give it a A- just because it's the tag. Nick Bolton re-signed $15 million a year, roughly. And I think that this was, I thought, he was, if not the best middle linebacker, to go on the market. You could argue Dre Greenlaw potentially, but Nick Bolton has been really good, as a stalwart of the linebacker room, on this team for years now since he's been drafted. I think this was a good signing. I think it might have been a little bit of an overpay just because, Nick Bolton probably, has done so well and wanted, but it's he's not the crazy flashiest guy. So I'm going to give it an A-. Matt Araiza, tendered by the team, $960. I'll take it. He's a boomer of a kicker. I'll actually give this an A to a punter. Long snapper James Winchester. I think obviously for kicking and that sort of thing, it was fine last year. Obviously they had a lot of kickers and it never seemed to be an issue. I actually will give this one an A grade because they had so many kickers on the Chiefs last year. Now the Raiders trade for Geno Smith, a 3rd round pick. I think was a little steep. You can't tell me you couldn't have gotten him for a 4th. or something like that. I'm gonna give this just, and especially since Geno wanted to leave, but I don't think it was brought to light. I think that's why the Raiders had to, do this. So I'm gonna give this one a B minus because I think that a third was kind of steep, for this old of a player. And then Alex Kappa, I think, is solid. I think that he's not like anything special, but he decent lineman on a team that, that needs O-line help. Edge Max Crosby, his extension, obviously he was the highest non-quarterback for a little bit before Myles Garrett. I'm just going to give this an A+. You can't really find talent like Crosby or tenacity like him, to be your franchise icon, for however many years. And then it's like Edge, Malcolm Kuntz, a 1-year, $12 million deal, probably a little bit steep, but not terrible. They pair him opposite Crosby. I'm going to give that one. I will give it a B+, though, because Kuntz is pretty good. D-line, Adam Butler. 3-year contract worth $16.5 million. I'm assuming that he's either the fourth most important amongst the front four, which makes this contract to me, wouldn't say steep, but it's like, you paid him because you had the money. I'm going to give it a B. And then Jeremy Chin, the safety, Trevon Moehrig left. You get Jeremy Chin, who is, a hard hitter, kind of like Moehrig, but maybe with a little bit more speed and upside and size, obviously. I'm going to give it a C+. Jeremy Chin only had that one kind of breakout year, and now he's disappeared, that sort of thing. He was on the Commanders last year, and the Commanders obviously had struggles even against longer runs. So it's like you kind of look at the safety play a little bit there as well, and it's like, who knows if he'll pan out better than Moehrig in their system? Who knows? Safety Isaiah Polamau signed a 2-year extension worth up to $8.45 million. I'm assuming this is kind of the other safety. I'm just gonna say it. I think the play just hasn't been good on Las Vegas, and it's like when you have a pass rush, but the back end play isn't very good, like it just raises a lot of questions. I'm gonna give this a C-. I think they should have looked for new talent or other players. Oh, the Los Angeles Chargers did sign Najee Harris. I actually kind of predicted this. I thought that Najee Harris fits what Harbaugh wants. He's durable. He hasn't had a good O-line, and it's like he also can be an outlet out of the backfield, having good hands for a big guy. This is huge. A 1-year deal worth up to $9.25 million. This looks like such a bargain deal for a young player that it's like, if he starts to pop off and you're like 6 games in, you're going to try to extend him as the Chargers, and that sort of thing. And I think that this is huge. I think that they realized that last year, with Dobbins, that he has the chance to get hurt, and it kind of puts your offense awry. I think this is huge. I am going to give this actually an A+ for getting, maybe not the best running back, because who knows if Nick Chubb, is going to could be that guy. But like Najee Harris, welcome, going across the country to somewhere warm where it's going to feel even warmer because they're going to appreciate you a bit more in the Chargers. And I'm super happy. The Chargers have always been a fun team to me, and I've always liked Herbert, and great signing here. And then center Bradley Bozeman re-signed a multi-year contract. Their line was good. I like this. And Bozeman, I'm going to give this an A-. Edge Khalil Mack coming back. I think this is the guy that, you should have kept out of Bosa and Mack. I feel sorry for Bosa because I think that he would have liked to be a lifelong Charger, but the injury issues. And Mack proved that he still has a lot in the tank. I'm going to give this an A+ because I think Khalil Mack he's needed on that defense, and it'd be kind of tricky to replace your pass rush completely in one off season with a strong defense. Defensive line, Ter Tart returning to the Chargers on a new deal. Not much here. I'm just going to give it a B. Cornerback Dante Jackson agreed to a 2-year, $13 million deal. I think Dante Jackson, knows the game well enough, and he's a solid piece. B+. Cornerback Elijah Molden. Obviously, this team also did lose Asante Samuel Jr. Cornerback Elijah Molden signed to a 3-year, $18.75 million extension. I think he was fine. I'm going to give this a B+ as well. Punter J.K. Scott, he did good, for them last year. Criticized sometimes for his lack of range on his punts, but he did good for them last year. I'm going to give this a B+. Moving on to the Cowboys, Javonte Williams, obviously leaving the Broncos, agreed to a 1-year, $3 million deal. I think that he can be a guy that you plug in and you're going to get. I'm going to give it a B. Offensive guard Robert Jones, obviously signing a 1-year deal worth up to $4.75 million. They obviously are losing Zach Martin to retirement, which is a big blow, and then exploring options to replace him. They got him for cheap. I'm going to give this a B+, even though I don't really know who Robert Jones is. D-line Osa Odighizuwa re-signed on a 4-year, $80 million contract. This does not surprise me. Odighizuwa, one of those players that just, Jerry Jones isn't going to let go. 4-year, $80 million. It's precocious. I am going to give it a B because I think that, they always end up overpaying. And it's like, this affects the likes of being able to re-sign Micah Parsons. Looking at cornerback CJ Goodwin, re-signed to a 1-year deal. The cornerback room kind of up in the air. They had a couple of 1-year wonders a couple years ago in Diggs, and then I can't even remember the other guy's name, where it's like last year it just kind of fell apart. The defense did kind of play better later in the season, under Zimmer. But it's like, now, do you even still have Zimmer and they're going to have to learn a new system? Who the heck knows? I'm going to give this a C because who the heck knows? Safety Marquez Bell, 3-year deal worth up to $12 million. He's cheap. It's the only reason I'm going to give this a B-. And then Lon Saber Trent Sieg, I'm going to say just because of how good their kicker is, this is an A signing to keep on the team. And then the Giants, Tommy DeVito. He was an exclusive rights free agent. I guess you keep him because you kind of know what you're getting. And I guess the Irish lore continues in New York. They re-signed Darius Slayton. They needed to re-sign this guy. He was their only other dude besides Neighbors. 3-year deal, $36 million. That's a bargain. I'm sure there would have been teams that would have been open to paying $14 to $16 million for this guy, who was always, not flashy, but consistent. Mr. Consistency on their team. So I'm going to give this an A. Tight end Chris Manhertz, re-signed. They don't do much with their tight ends, I think, in New York. I'm just going to give this a B. Offensive tackle James Hudson. I just, the line hasn't been the greatest in New York. You bring in new blood for, I guess, competition or to see, or as a depth piece. I'm going to give it a B+. Edge Chauncey Golston, an older guy. I don't know how much you really need the edge, I guess, on this team when you had trade for Brian Burns before last year, and you've got Kayvon Thibodeau. I'm going to give this a C-. Defensive line, Roy Robertson Harris, 2-year, $9 million. C-. Linebacker Chris Board, 2-year deal worth up to $6 million. I'm going to give it a C+. Cornerback Paulson Adebo, I like him. 3-year, $18 million contract that includes $36 million fully guaranteed. I like the way he played, but it's like, it wasn't like he was one of the The DBs for the Giants overall were shaky last year. I'm going to say for this one, I'm going to say B minus. They were good when they were good, but there was sometimes that I was questioning, like, what in the world are you doing? Safety Javon Holland, a 3-year, $45.5 million deal, $30 million in guarantees. I like Javon Holland. This is, I guess, their Xavier McKinney replacement at like a year, like 2 years, a year later after his, departure or whatever. I'm going to give this a B plus. Punter Jamie Gillen, boom, can kick it far, makes it a little bit easier on the defense that this guy has a boom and a young leg or whatever else, 3.3 million. I'll give it an A. Line on snapper, I don't know, B. And the Eagles with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think he fits the mold in case Hurts ever goes down, more so than Kenny Pickett would in their system, as a, big running, physical quarterback in a way. For, Carter and Trey Lawrence with a 5th round pick, I'll give this an A. Saquon Barkley's extension, he earned it. In a way, I think their O-line obviously paved, a good amount of the way on a good amount of long runs and that sort of thing. But Saquon, might as well sign him before he puts up another year of like, I don't think he'll get 2K this year, but it's like maybe he puts up like 16 or 1700, which is still just impressive, The guard, Kenyon Green, he fits their system. I will give this a B plus because I think he fits the mold and he'll be playing at right guard. And it's like losing CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think that was more of a move to like save money, for the future. And then linebacker Zach Bond re-signing on a 3-year, $51 million deal. It's kind of high. But he did play really well last year. I guess I'll say for this one a B plus because I think the contract's a little high, for a guy that he was good, but you had good linebacker play from so many guys, last year. And moving on to the Commanders, Deebo Samuel. I hated this trade. This is not who they should have went for. Deebo played like crap. He was out of shape last year. You're one of the, you're on a team with a lot of stacked talent, and then it's like you're dropping the ball. You're just playing like an old washed up has-been. I don't even think, if I was a Niners fan, I would not care that he was gone, hearing about these demands and that sort of thing. I'm going to give this for the Commanders. I'm going to give it a D plus because I think that at face value it could be bad, but who knows? If Deebo returns to form and that sort of thing, it'll be good, for a 5th round pick. But with how stacked the draft is this year, you could have went with someone else, someone younger with more upside, even in the later rounds, perhaps. Tight end John Bates, 3-year, $21 million. Seems kind of high when you know that Zach Ertz is coming back, and Zach Ertz is getting like less in a way. Perhaps, it'll be more with the incentives, obviously, but like, seems weird unless they see something in John Bates. I don't know. I kind of trust the Commanders because they instilled that culture in that team. I'll give it a B minus because I think it's a little high. Zach Ertz, I'll give this an A. He was very good with Jaden Daniels. And then Laramie Tunsil, this trade for a 4th round pick. I love this. For them. The Texans really screwed the pooch. For this, it's like, for the Texans, I'm giving this a D minus. Doesn't make any sense to get rid of your cornerstone piece on your O-line when your O-line sucked last year, outside of Tunsil. And, it's like they did trade a good number of picks, the Commanders, but it's like, I don't know. I think it's kind of asinine. It's like this year it's a 4th rounder, which obviously would be good for this draft, but it's like a 3rd and a 7th. Wait a minute. Oh, 2nd and 4th round picks. Maybe not. Now I'm kind of thinking, I don't know. The Commanders, it was a little bit of an issue for protection, but it wasn't like it was crazy bad. But now I'm kind of second guessing this. It's such a time will tell thing. I'll give a B plus to the Commanders for this. And then maybe won't be as harsh on the Texans because I guess it was a big haul of draft picks. I will give the Texans a B minus just because it's so up in the air. And it's like if you only hit on like one out of all these picks or something like that, it's like, oh, it's a flop. Because that one probably won't be as good of a cornerstone player as Tunsil would have been. Javon Kinlaw, I don't like this. It's an overpay for a guy that isn't good against the run. And the run was what killed you and murdered you. And it's like what may prevent you from moving past the Eagles, assuming the Eagles are just as good, which they probably will be, or close to it, and be a deadly team again. So I don't know. I don't like this. I don't mind Kinlaw because I think he does fit with Daron Payne in that power rush style so that you can get pressure up the middle, which is the quickest pressure in the game. But are you going to be able to get to 3rd and long where they're like, oh, we have to throw this thing? I'll give this a B minus. Linebacker Bobby Wagner, 1-year deal, $10 million. He still plays very well. I'll give this an A minus just because he is a little bit older and I would like to see them get a linebacker that has more tenacity and versatility. Kicker Zane Gonzalez. I don't think they had really issues, I guess, kicking last year. I think the Commanders, I'll give this one an A minus. Just because I don't completely know. Tress Way, he's a fine punter. Re-signed. We'll give it an A. Now the Bears. Tight end Durham Smythe. Why in the world do you need Durham Smythe? You've got Cole Kmet, right? I don't know the money. I'm gonna say it's a B minus. Offensive guard Jonah Jackson with the Rams. I don't remember Jonah Jackson being that good, I guess, but you are losing. I'm trying to remember his name, but obviously their interior was dog last year, as everyone knows, on the Bears. Guard Joe Thuney, he'll be able to move back to guard probably, after playing tackle at the end of the season for the Chiefs last year for a 4th round draft pick. I think that's a little bit of I think that they got a little, I mean, even with how good Joe Thuney is, I think the Bears got kind of swindled. A 4th round pick? When, I guess you look at Tunsil and he went for like a 4th and many others and that sort of thing. But it's like, maybe it'll work. I think their whole O-line coaching problem is a coaching problem. I don't think it's, necessarily a personnel problem because there were times last year that they held blocks fairly long. And then Caleb Williams was the reason for holding the ball way too damn long, and that sort of thing. But then center Drew Dahlman, I think 3-year, $42 million contract. They only had to do this because they had to overpay, and he was the top center on the market, more than likely. The thing that I worry about with this is that, people are so high on Dahlman, and the thing with free agency is it's like he came from an O-line that was very dominant overall. It reminds me a little bit of the Eagles in the sense that, like, why didn't they re-sign Mekhi Becton? He couldn't have been, like, way too expensive or that sort of thing. But it's like, you think about it and it's like, they're like, oh, what he did, another could do. And it's like, Atlanta, obviously, Atlanta, it's like they've got a star-studded offense, and that sort of thing. They could never really do, super, super well, in terms of being consistent on offense last year. But it's like, I mean, only time will tell. But my theory, perhaps is that it's like, the center is the leader typically of the group, and they have to have good chemistry with the quarterback and all of that and that sort of thing. And they have to be an intelligent player, and it's important to have a good one, an experienced one. But it's like, at the end of the day, to me, it's kind of like, what, is it the unit as a whole, or is it this player being able to kind of like, blend into the unit that is overall strong, and thus they've gotten money? That's my opinion. I will still give this a B+. And the O-line, it's more like everyone always says the O-line is all about chemistry. So it's like, that's why I'm not fully bought on Drew Dahlman, being, oh man, this guy is going to change the O-line. And it's like, scheme is a lot too. And it's like, don't get me wrong, Ben Johnson, good scheme. But it's like, who knows? Edge, Deo, Odeyin, I'm sorry, butcher the name. They need Edge. They probably overpaid for this guy. Or wait, do they need Edge? Wait a minute. Why did I say that? I don't really think they need Edge. I thought it was weird I honestly thought it was weird. I mean, they obviously did a good amount of like offensive line signings and stuff, but I think they really needed to do that much on defense, to be honest with you. So like, this seems kind of expensive. Ode Yingbo or whatever, he, is, I guess, a pretty good player, but I think that they overpaid for this guy. I just don't see it, with how much they're paying him. I guess they could have gotten Scrozzled for a bit more, but I'm just going to give this a B grade. Defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, another Falcon, former Falcon, 3-year, 43.5. For an aging guy that like is a run stuffing stalwart, I guess, but it's not like the Bears were bad against the run last year. I'll give it a B just because I don't know if it improves where they are. And then linebacker, Amen Agbanbamiga, resigning to a two-year $5 million deal. Depth piece, obviously. We'll give it a B. And then long snapper Scott Daly. We all know that their kicker has a good leg, but it's like, it wasn't the most consistent last year. Who knows if Scott Daly was the reason for that? I'll just give it a B. The Lions, re-signing, Marcus Davenport. This is a guy who never lived up to expectation, obviously. I think this is the cheapest I've ever seen him sign for, but he's not terrible. He will give you a little bit of production, but I'm assuming he'll be a backup, next year after they draft a pass rusher to go opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Derek Barnes signed a 3-year, $25 million extension. I think Derek Barnes is fine. I don't think this was an overpay at all either. I think this is a B signing. DJ Reed signing a free agent deal. I can't remember what they said his deal was for, but it seemed kind of like a bargain compared to like Carlton Davis. And this was apparently the marquee free agent, cornerback, not like the youngest, but he's 28, 29 years old. And it's like, they're obviously doing it, and they got cheaper, because if they were to sign Carlton and he asked for anything like what he got from the Patriots, it's like, you're shooting yourself in the foot as the Lions. I'm going to give this a B+, just because I think that the way that they ran defense, and I mean, who knows, we'll see if it's the same kind of defense, with a new coordinator this year, but like, who knows, right? DJ Reed, B+. Now I'm on to my Packers. There's Aaron Banks, a 4-year, $77 million deal. People said this was a huge overpay, but apparently only his signing bonus is guaranteed. type of thing. So it's like, it sounds like it's a, it's a smart scheme for my Packers. And I know that, maybe you guys are going to say that, hey, this is too much money for a guard. I'm going to say that until we see the structure of the contract, and what I'm kind of looking for with the, Packers, is that Goot's always very good with money, and that the kicking down the can is gone from the Packers, and they don't want to dig themselves that hole again. I'm going to give it a B+, to further solidify the O-line. That was a strength for the Packers last year that led up. I think they were like the third or fourth best line in the league or something like that. Re-signing Isaiah McDuffie, I don't think it was an overpay. Isaiah McDuffie, I think you know what you get with him. He's a good run defender, not a good pass protector. I'm going to give this actually a C+, just because I think that, he may not see as much playing time this year, assuming Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker are healthy, who obviously showed Cooper like an instant linebacker star when he was playing at the end of the season consistently, and Quay showed a jump in ability in this new Jeff Hafley defense. So looking at McDuffie, I'm going to give it a C+. Yeah, C+, because I think it adds good depth, but I don't think, he's pushing the bar of the linebacker room. And now looking at Nate Hobbs, a 6-foot corner, former Raider, 4-year, $48 million deal with $16 million guaranteed. I saw so many people saying that, they don't pay him this kind of money unless they're a starter. It's like, it's only $16 million guaranteed over 4 years. That is not that much. $48 million shows that it is a heavy incentive-based deal. And the reason Hobbs took it is because he thinks and has the confidence to be able to fulfill those incentives. That is what this is. Obviously, it's kind of unique. You see a almost half $100 million deal. You think marquee potentially, or at least above average. Hobbs, to me, is to add depth with the potential for him to potentially flourish in the Jeff Hafley defense. Not knowing, and not willing to commit this kind of thing. So I'm giving this deal an A- because I think it was very smart. And it was one of these that, hey, we don't need you, but we know that you potentially want decent money. We'll give you a heavy incentive-laden deal, and we'll see if you can prove it, type of thing, and be a piece on this defense for 4 years potentially. So yeah, A-. And it's mostly because Hobbs is a dog. I think he fits that. I think he fits, that mold, of what the Packers go for on DB, or have been for a little while now, of these aggressive guys that are get in your face type players, and and can cover really well. Now, Brandon McManus, obviously everyone knows of the kicker carousel in Green Bay that started with, why am I trying to remember his name? Anders Carlson went to another, Greg Joseph to bring in for a competition, then brought in a rookie kicker, before the regular season, who didn't pan out, got released once McManus was cleared to play again. And McManus came in and won several games off of his leg for the Packers. So it's like a little over $5 million a year. I will take it. Brandon McManus, this is an A+ signing because everyone knows how important kicker is in this league. Now on to the Vikings. Aaron Jones re-signing, $20 million. I think it's great. I think he deserves it. I think he's obviously, I think he's, older. He's like a top 5 age in the league or whatever you would say that, type of thing at his age. I think it's great. I'm going to give this a B plus just because I think they should have utilized him more, and especially near the end of the season with his experience and how the passing game kind of stuttered because they committed way too much. They committed to it way too much. Offensive guard Will Fries, 5-year, $88 million. He has been pretty good for them. People were saying, I've heard people saying that the O-line for the Vikings was bad. It's like they had to literally act on the fly when Darrisaw went out for the year. And they actually weren't really, they were a middle of the pack ranked team at the end of the year. I think they were ranked like 18th overall on PFF or something like that. I'm pretty sure. And, I think that, maybe this is a slight overpay, but I'm going to give it a B plus. Center Ryan Kelly, 2-year, $18 million. I think that's a good deal. I think that, Ryan Kelly's done well. I'm going to give this an A minus. Defensive tackle Jonathan Allen. Obviously, Jonathan Allen left Washington, correct? Left Washington, age 30, but is still a beast. A beast. I love Jonathan Allen. I'm pissed he's on the Vikings at $20 million a year or something like that. I'm going to give this is going to be another A plus. Cornerback Byron Murphy re-signing. Unfortunately, because I thought my Packers were going to go for him. 3 years, $66 million. I definitely think they kind of overpaid for him, at his age. You look at Byron Murphy, you guys. I guess he's 27. They have him through when he's 30 or whatever else. I think it's a little bit of an overpay. I think that Byron Murphy would get, beat sometimes. And it's like the Brian Flores defense, has a good pass rush. So it's like, if you're getting beat and you have a good pass rush, I'm sorry. But like, the Vikings DB room, minus Harrison Smith was kind of shaky last year, even with having like Stephon Gilmore and Byron Murphy and that sort of thing. So it's like, because of the overpay, I'm actually giving this a B minus. Theo Jackson, 2-year, 12.6 extension. Obviously, this is the guy they're rolling with unless they draft somebody. I'm going to give it a B. He wasn't the starter last year. Obviously, we talked about Bynum, who left, and then Theo Jackson, just another kind of plug and play, because it's not a high position of need, I think, for this team. Punter Ryan Wright, 1 year, 1.75, B plus, because it's so cheap. NFC South, Jake Matthews, extension. Why do I feel like they overpay this guy? I don't mind Jake Matthews, but I feel like he gets beat sometimes. I think he's obviously better in like the run game and that sort of thing. But why do I feel like this guy just always gets paid? Atlanta loves him too much, almost, in my opinion. I'm actually going to give this a B minus too, because I think obviously he's been a stalwart on the team for a while, but like, it's a gross overpay. And then linebacker Divine Diablo, 2 year, $14 million. Solid, hard-hitting, pretty speedy linebacker, which I think is fine. I'm going to give this a B plus because it is cheap. Lawn snapper, B. 4-year extension. I guess he was a restricted free agent. He's obviously done a good enough job. Younghoe Koo isn't the most consistent kicker, but hey, they haven't really had any problems with the snap from what I've seen. So, I'll give this a B plus. The Panthers re-signing the Red Rocket, you guys, to a 2-year deal. I think he was fine in a pinch. Obviously, if he has to do more than like one game, I think he gets exposed. He's like the one game wonder after your QB I don't know, get some sort of 1-game injury, and that sort of thing. Tight end Tommy Tremble re-signing. He was one of the better ones. They get him for cheap. I think this was, I think this was smart of them. If they let go of Tommy Tremble, I think that you're just like losing talent that could still be good. Assuming you make that O-line better and you're able to maybe get one more weapon besides Tommy Tremble and then Xavier Legette. Because obviously Thielen's was a good chemistry, but like he's old. He's going to be done here soon. So yeah, Tommy Tremble. I'm going to give this a B+. Just because he hasn't produced at the level that I think he could. But I think that's an offensive issue, not a Tommy Tremble issue. Center Austin Corbett, re-signing on a free agent deal. I don't know much about this. I'll give it a B. Edge Patrick Jones the second, graded a 2-year deal worth up to $20 million. I don't know who Patrick Jones is. Who did he play on before? The Vikings? Strange. I've never heard of him, but he looked like he had good size and that sort of thing. I'm just going to give it a B because they do need edge. Defensive line, Tershawn Warden, 3-year deal worth up to $54 million. Tershawn Warden played, obviously. Is this Kansas City? That has to be Kansas City, right? Why do I feel... Okay, he was on Kansas City before. This guy never got playing time. It's kind of just like, why in the world are you paying this guy? I'm going to say... I'm just going to say a B- on it. I do think that they need D-line, but obviously, you already have a lot of money invested in Derek Brown, who it's like isn't bad, but who knows? We'll see. Bobby Brown, the second nose tackle. This just seems like another bizarre kind of thing, too. It's like a 3-year, $21 million as your nose tackle. I'll give it a C+. JC Horn extension makes sense, making him I believe the highest paid, which I agree with. I think he's one of the few guys that he's like can cover these guys really well. He has had a little bit of injury issue, but he is a baller. You lose him and you start to restructure your whole cornerback room. A+. Cornerback Mike Jackson. No problem with him, but he's, what you're getting. Type player, I'll say C+. Then safety Trevor Merrick from the Raiders. 3-year, $51 million. It just seems kind of high. Like $17 million a year for this guy. I don't know. It's weird. If you couldn't get value out of Chin, who left, and then you go after, Merrick. I have no idea what to think of this. I like Merrick, but he hasn't done anything in his career, and he was projected as one of the top safeties in the draft class he was in. If not the best. I'll say, I'm just gonna say a B. No, you know what? We're bumping it down. It's B- because I think it's expensive for this guy. Unless he flashes and he's like, holy crap, yeah, man, we're really glad we got him, but it's kind of a head scratcher a little bit. The Saints, Davon Godchaux, 7th round pick. Davon Godchaux has been a journeyman on the Dolphins, Patriots, and now New Orleans. I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm just going to give it a B. Edge Chase Young, they're re-signing. That's huge for them. He's like their only young player that's like a star player. 3-year, $51 million deal. I think that that's affordable. Another $17 million a year. I think that that's perfectly fine. They definitely didn't overpay for Chase Young. So I'm gonna give that a B+. Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin re-signing. I think this is huge. He clearly loves Tampa Bay and the Buccaneers. I'm going to give this an A+ as well, because I do think he'll return to form. Offensive guard, Ben Bredeson. I always called this guy the breadwinner of the O-line, and he was good. A 3-year, $22 million deal. I think that's great. I'll give this an A-. Linebacker Levante David still playing very well. 1 year, $10 million. That's $9 million guaranteed. I will give this an A. Edge Hassan Reddick, $14 million for him. I think that he'll revitalize kind of his career. Obviously, it was slightly derailed with a Jets team last year that was just dookie on defense. I'm going to give this a A- as well. And then punter Riley Dixon, 2 years, $6 million. Give it a B+. Moving on to the Cardinals, Kelvin Beachum. I think he was one of their decent O-linemen. We'll give it a B+. Offensive guard Evan Brown, 2 years, up to $11.5 million. We'll give it a B. Edge Baron Browning on a 2-year, $50 million deal of max and 19. I think that is good as well. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say for that, because they need the position, I'm gonna say it's an A-. And then Edge Josh Sweat, I'm gonna give this an A. I think it's a solid addition. Linebacker Akeem Davis Gaither, 2-year, $11 million, B. Long snapper Aaron Brewer, B. The Rams acquiring Jimmy Garoppolo, $4.5 million. Obviously the backup. I'm going to give this a C, just because I think Jimmy G, it's like if you're playing him, you're not relying on him to be able to win games, and that sort of thing. And I think it's just a curious thing that they get at Davante Adams, who we'll talk about here in a second, and Jimmy G back when Jimmy G could not hit a pass to Davante to save his life on the Raiders, when Davante was wide the hell open. QB Matt Stafford, restructured. I think this was the play. The rumors about Rodgers going here, I think that the problem with getting Rodgers is that if he's only going to play like 1 or 2 years, that means you would have to find your QB replacement. With a guy like Stafford to me could play a while, assuming he doesn't get banged up. So he obviously a revised deal, type of thing, will be on there for some years and that sort of thing. So I think this was great for them. I'm going to give it an A+. I think that Stafford retiring a Ram just makes sense with who they are. And, maybe they draft a QB to develop, and then give him at least 2, maybe 3 years. Offensive tackle Alaric Jackson. I feel like, who is Alaric Jackson and who did he play for? Let me see this. Oh, so he did play for this team. It's obviously a little bit younger. Re-signing. I just wonder, because their run game was pretty decent, but the passing protection, wasn't the best. So it's like, is this... I'm gonna give it a B, because they need O-line, but overall, I don't know. I don't know if this guy pushes the needle on the O-line at all. Now we get to Davante Adams, obviously one of the marquee wide receiver free agents. I think this was a great deal for the Rams, and I think that they really were like, this was the reason why they're very willing to move on from Cooper Kupp, a player that since his Triple Crown has been injury prone, hasn't been as consistent. And, Davante Adams has done well on every single team he's ever been on. He really put to rest that, it was Rodgers, after leaving Rodgers and doing well with Derek Carr, of all people, and whatever else. But this is great. He's a more durable and better version of Cooper Kupp. paired with Stafford, I think this is actually scary. People could say that, oh, he was injured, when he was on the Raiders last year. No, he was holding out to make sure he didn't get injured so he could get out of there because they did him dirty in Las Vegas. So looking at this, I'm going to give it an A+ because I think that it really solidifies that Puka and Adams, two guys, and even Puka's had injury issues, but it's like, even if you lose Puka and you only had Adams, I'm sure that him and Stafford and his accuracy are going to click, and they're going to be able to just give headaches to opposing defenses. Tutu Atwell coming back at $10 million. It's interesting. I feel like he was reliable at key times, but he obviously didn't carry this team. They obviously wanted to keep him because they know what he's capable of. I don't think it's a huge overpay based on kind of the clutch factor of Tutu at times. And I'm going to say that this one is a A-, contrary to what people think. Poona Ford signing a 3-year deal worth up to $29.6 million. You know what you're getting with this guy. I don't think there's an issue with him. Obviously, coming from the Chargers, I think that, Poona Ford, brings some depth to the O-line and is an attempt at, making that run defense better, on the interior. So I'm going to give it a B+. San Fran, Patrick Taylor, 1-year deal. I think he does well for them when he's called upon and he's a smart player. I'm just going to give it a B+. Richie Grant, $200,000 guaranteed on this. It's kind of one of those crazy, bizarre deals that it's like, what in the world type of thing. But obviously San Fran, they don't have much money, especially with Purdy's contract looming. And who knows what that'll look like. I'm just going to say that it's a B. Luke Farrell, 3-year deal. They don't even list this guy as his position right here for whatever reason. Tight end. He was obviously a guy, Jaguars. That's Jaguars, right? It's kind of one of those things that he was a backup. They're obviously, I feel like they're overpaying this guy. It's so strange to me. I'm going to give this a D+ because it seems like they're overpaying him. It's so weird. Offensive guard, Ben Bartch. He's been really good. A young player, a 1-year extension. I'm going to give this an A-. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, Darnold signing there. I thought they got him for cheaper than Darnold could have went for. I feel like he could have. I thought it was reported that it was updated to 110 or something like that, but it's like it wasn't quite $40 million a year, obviously, which I thought Darnold would be able to get. But, obviously, with maybe recent events and all these things happening with QBs, teams were, treading water, not wanting to go full in on a QB anymore, especially from a system like Minnesota. I'm going to give this a A- just because there is a little uncertainty, but I think it was a good signing by Seattle. And then offensive tackle Josh Jones, good for them. Good for them and that sort of thing. Agreed to a 1-year deal worth up to $4.75 million. Their O-line is an issue there. Jaron Reed resigned to a 3-year deal worth up to $25 million. Cheap. Josh Jones, I'm going to give a B- because I don't think he's, an answer. Jaron Reed re-signed to a 3-year deal with up to $25 million. I remember when this guy played on my Packers and we had to let him go because he was getting too expensive. He deserves this, but it's a cheap deal. A grade for the Seattle. And then Ernest Jones on a 3-year deal. That's, below average for linebackers. I think that it's incredible. And I think that, Ernest Jones really came in and he did well for them last year. And it's like, I like Ernest Jones. I think that he's a good dude, and he brought some, and they're trying to get good vibes in Seattle, you know, with the players that they are retaining. A+ for Ernest Jones. So that's going to do it for this video. I know I tried to do it as quick as I can with all of these signings. You know, maybe next time I only cover really the players that I know when there's more signings and that sort of thing that I'm going to have to keep track of. But if you guys like this, or if you have any opinion on any of the signings that happened or anything I've said here, please leave a comment. You know, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see content like this at least twice a week. I'm sure I'll be doing shorter videos, you know, on free agency with some of these, you know, the signings that happen post, you know, the initial day. But, you know, tell me what you think. Tell me if, you know, what free agents are available and where you think they will sign, because there's still a good amount available. But as always, this is Cast, and I am your host, Cassie Streeter. And as always, go Pack Go.